always thought love was supposed to be gentle. Soft smiles across a cafe table. Hands brushing under the city lights. A safe place to land when the world felt too sharp. That's what I thought I had with Ethan. For 3 years I loved him. Wholeheartedly, completely. I gave him my time, my trust, my quiet devotion. I never expected him to break my heart. Not in the way that he did. But one night everything changed. It was supposed to be a simple dinner with friends. Ethan was laughing, his deep voice blending with the murmur of the restaurant. I had left my scarf inside, so I walked back toward the private booth we had reserved. That's when I heard them. "She's just plain, you know?" I froze. It was Ethan's voice. A chuckle from one of his friends. "Come on, man. She's your girlfriend. Yeah, but you have to admit she's nothing special. Not ugly, but not exactly turning heads either. Just there." My heart stopped. "I don't know, man. She's nice and all, but sometimes I think I could do better." The air rushed out of my lungs. The man I had loved, the one I had believed saw me, had never truly seen me at all. I gripped the fabric of my dress, my stomach twisting. I wanted to walk away, pretend I never heard it. But then another voice chimed in. "So why are you still with her?" Ethan's answer? A laugh. As if the idea of loving me wasn't even worth considering. I didn't stay to hear more. I turned on my heel and walked out of that restaurant, my vision blurring, my chest aching like someone had reached inside me and ripped something out. I wanted to cry. To scream. But more than anything, I wanted to disappear. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I wandered the streets, my arms wrapped around myself. The words echoed in my head over and over. "She's just plain. I think I could do better." Every memory we shared felt tainted now. Had he ever loved me? Or had I just been convenient? It wasn't until the early morning that I finally texted him. "We need to talk." He didn't respond immediately. Maybe he was sleeping. Maybe he was with someone else. I didn't care. By the time he finally messaged back, the pain had turned into something colder. Sharper. I met him at our usual cafe, the place where we had our first date. But today the warmth was gone. Ethan looked confused when he saw me. "Hey babe, you okay?" I studied him. The tousled brown hair, the easy grin, the face I had once memorized like my favorite book. And I realized something. I would never be good enough for someone like him. Not because of who I was, but because of who he was. I exhaled. "I heard what you said last night." His expression faltered. "What?" "You said I was plain. That you could do better." I watched his face carefully, waiting for him to deny it. To say it wasn't true. But all he did was shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Ella, listen." I held up a hand. "No, Ethan. I get it now." His jaw clenched. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I laughed. A hollow, empty sound. "I don't think I am." For 3 years I had given him my heart. And all he had seen was someone forgettable. I reached for my bag, standing up. "This is over," I said, my voice steady. For a moment he looked shocked. As if he never imagined I would be the one to walk away. "Ella, come on. You're being dramatic." I smiled. A real smile. "Maybe. But at least I'm not settling for someone who thinks I'm nothing special." And with that I walked out of the cafe. And out of his life. That night I cried. Not for Ethan. But for the girl I had been. The one who had loved too softly, too gently, expecting love to be kind in return. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Was I really that plain? No. I was just invisible to him. But I swore at that moment that I would never be invisible again. Because one day, Ethan would see me. And he'd regret ever letting me go. I didn't wake up feeling powerful. I didn't stare into the mirror and instantly transform into someone new. Instead, I woke up feeling hollow. Like something inside me had been taken away and I didn't know how to get it back. 4 days I went through the motions. Work, home, sleep. Repeat. But Ethan's words never left me. "She's just plain. I could do better." I told myself it didn't matter. But at night, alone in my tiny apartment, it did. It mattered too much. I wasn't heartbroken over losing him. I was heartbroken over the way he had made me feel. As if I wasn't worthy of being desired. As if I was forgettable. And I didn't know how to fix that. Until the day I ran into Sienna Monroe. Sienna Monroe had been one of those girls in high school. The kind who walked into a room and everyone noticed. The kind who always seemed to have a perfect, effortless glow. And now, 5 years later, she wasn't just someone from my past. She was famous. A rising actress, her face plastered across billboards, magazine covers, and trending social media videos. I hadn't seen her since we were teenagers. But there she was, standing in front of me in a downtown cafe, ordering a matcha latte like she wasn't one of the most talked about new celebrities in the industry. I should have kept walking. But she turned her head and our eyes met. For a second she squinted as if trying to place me. Then her face lit up. Ella. I froze. Yeah. She grinned, stepping closer. Oh my God, it's been years. How are you? I blinked. This wasn't how I imagined meeting someone like her. Someone whose world felt too far from mine. But her warmth was genuine. And suddenly I wasn't just the plain girl anymore. I was someone she recognized. We sat by the window and I told her everything. Not because I wanted to, but because she had that way of making people talk. Maybe that was part of her charisma. Maybe I was just tired of keeping it all inside. Either way, I found myself spilling everything. About Ethan. About the way he had seen me as nothing. About the way I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he was right. Sienna listened without interrupting. Then she leaned back in her chair, sipping her drink, eyes thoughtful. You know, she said finally, I used to feel that way too. I nearly laughed. Yeah, right. She smirked. You think I was always like this? You were always beautiful. Her eyes twinkled. Maybe. But beauty isn't about looks. It's about how you make people feel when you walk into a room. I frowned. What do you mean? She set her cup down. Ethan didn't call you plain because of how you looked, Ella. He called you plain because you let yourself fade into the background. And the truth is, most people don't notice the quiet ones. My chest tightened. So what do? I asked quietly. She smiled as if she had been waiting for me to ask that. You stop fading. That night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror again. I saw the same black-haired girl with deep brown eyes staring back at me. The same features I had always had. But something was different now. Maybe it was the way I held myself. Maybe it was the way I refused to shrink under my own doubts. I didn't need to change who I was. But I did need to find out who I could become. Sienna had given me a name, a place to start. A transformation agency. A place where models, influencers, actors, and even ordinary people went to reinvent themselves. I wasn't sure if it was ridiculous or brilliant. But I had spent my whole life waiting for someone to notice me, and finally I was done waiting. I was going to make the world see me. I didn't sleep that night. Sienna's words echoed in my head, repeating like a mantra. You let yourself fade into the background. Stop fading. I turned on my side, staring at my reflection in the dim light from my phone. My blonde hair fanned across the pillow, my green eyes dull with exhaustion. He was right. Ethan hadn't called me plain because of my looks. He had called me plain because I had let myself blend in. Because I had made myself small. I had spent years trying to be the perfect girlfriend. Quiet. Supportive. Never asking for too much. And for what? For a man who laughed at me behind my back? I clenched my jaw, a strange fire burning in my chest. No more. If Ethan couldn't see my worth, then I would make sure he wasn't even in the same league to look at me again. I grabbed my phone, scrolling to the number Sienna had given me. I hovered over it for a moment. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I hit call. I expected some sleek, intimidating office. Instead, the transformation agency was surprisingly warm. The walls were lined with mirrors, photos of past clients. People who had gone from forgettable to icons. A woman with striking silver blonde hair and icy blue eyes greeted me at the front desk. She was effortlessly elegant, her voice smooth as silk. You must be Ella Harper, she said, offering a polite smile. Welcome to Rain Agency. I swallowed. Hi. I don't know exactly where to start. She tilted her head. You're not here for a surface-level change, are you? I hesitated. Then I shook my head. No, I admitted. I want more than that. She nodded as if she already knew. Then let's begin. The next few weeks were brutal. I had always thought a makeover was just about a haircut, a few new outfits, maybe some makeup tips. But this was about rebuilding myself from the ground up. I learned how to carry myself differently, how to walk into a room with my shoulders back, my chin high like I owned the space. I learned how to speak with confidence, how to hold eye contact, how to command attention without having to fight for it. And yes, the physical changes came too. My blonde hair was brightened, styled into soft, luxurious waves. My features, once hidden behind minimal effort, were now highlighted in a way that made them striking. I learned how to dress in a way that didn't hide me. How to move, how to make people notice. How to stop fading. But the biggest change, it wasn't the way I looked. It was the way I felt. "You're ready," Sienna said one evening, watching me from across the mirror-lined studio. I scoffed. "I don't feel ready." She smirked. "Good. That means you're not pretending. You're just becoming." I stared at my reflection. The girl who had sat in that cafe listening to Ethan rip her apart? She was gone. And in her place was someone unapologetic. Someone who was ready to be seen. A week later, I was grabbing coffee when I heard a voice behind me. "You have an incredible look." I turned to find a man, well-dressed, sharp-eyed, holding a business card. "I work in talent scouting," he continued. "Are you a model?" I blinked. "No." His gaze didn't waver. "You should be." A month ago I would have laughed, shrunk away. But now. I took his card, smiled. And for the first time I felt like I was about to step into a world that was waiting for me. Not as the girl Ethan had called plain, but as someone unforgettable. I should have felt out of place, standing in the middle of a high-end photography studio, surrounded by professionals who had worked with faces I had only seen on magazine covers. The lights were bright, the room buzzing with movement, yet I stood still, letting the stylist adjust a few loose strands of my blonde waves before stepping back. The camera was ready. The photographer lifted his lens. "All right, Ella, give me confidence," he called, positioning himself for the first shot. Confidence. That word used to feel like an ill-fitting dress, something I had tried on but never truly owned. But today, as I squared my shoulders and met the camera's gaze with unwavering focus, I realized something. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't trying to be confident. I simply was. The shutter clicked. And again. Each snap capturing not just my image but the transformation that had taken place inside me. "That's it," the photographer murmured, adjusting his lens. "Effortless. Like you've belonged here all along." I held my pose, but something inside me stirred. Because the truth was, I hadn't always belonged here. A few months ago I was just a girl who blended into the background, the kind of person no one looked at twice. Now, people were starting to notice. It all began with small projects. A few test shoots, local fashion ads, nothing that screamed success. But those small steps built momentum. One gig led to another. My schedule filled up. And then one day an email landed in my inbox that changed everything. The subject line read, "Editorial feature, Vogue Italia." For a moment I simply stared at it, my heart pounding. It had to be a mistake. A scam even. But as I read the details, the reality sank in. Someone had seen my latest shoot, a campaign for an up-and-coming designer, and they wanted me to be part of an exclusive feature. I clutched my phone, barely breathing. This wasn't small anymore. This was real. The day the editorial was released, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few positive comments, a couple of new followers. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, then a constant stream of notifications. Confused, I unlocked my screen only to see my own face staring back at me. A close-up from the editorial, my green eyes piercing through the camera, my expression poised yet undeniably captivating. And right above it, the headline that made my breath catch. "Who is the mystery model taking over the industry?" It wasn't just one article. There were tweets, Instagram posts. People were asking about me, searching for my name. The image was being shared across platforms, and within hours my following had doubled. I scrolled through the comments, my fingers trembling. "She's stunning. How have I never seen her before?" New favorite model calling it now. Ella Harper. Remember the name. The world was noticing me. The realization sent a thrill down my spine, and yet before I could fully process it, my phone buzzed again. This time with a name I hadn't expected. Ethan. I stared at the screen. "Is this really you?" I didn't reply. The second text came the next morning. "Ella, we need to talk." A small, knowing smile tugged at my lips. There was a time when I would have dropped everything at the mere thought of him wanting to talk. When his approval, his attention had meant everything. But not anymore. That version of me was gone. 2 weeks later, I attended my first major event. A high-profile fashion gala. The kind of exclusive event I had once only seen from the outside. Stepping out of the car, I felt the fabric of my designer gown hug my frame, the soft weight of my curls cascading over my shoulders. The moment I stepped onto the carpet, cameras flashed, voices called my name. I walked forward steady poised. And for the first time in my life I wasn't just another face in the background. I was someone to be seen. The night of the gala stayed with me long after the flashing cameras and murmured compliments faded into silence. It wasn't just the glamour, the high-end gowns, or the A-list crowd that made it unforgettable. It was the shift I felt within myself. I had walked through those grand doors as someone who belonged, someone who commanded attention, and I had left knowing I would never again let the world make me small. But recognition was a strange thing. It came in waves, small at first, almost unnoticeable, then growing, gaining strength until suddenly it was everywhere. After the Vogue Italia feature, brands started reaching out. My inbox filled with offers, campaigns, commercials, runway opportunities. Each morning I woke up to more requests, my name spreading through the industry faster than I could comprehend. I had spent years feeling invisible, and now I was the face people couldn't stop talking about. And yet, for all the buzz, the invitations, the whispers of "who is she?" there was one moment that truly made me realize how far I had come. It happened on an ordinary afternoon in the least glamorous of places, a grocery store. I had run in quickly, oversized sunglasses covering most of my face, my blonde waves tied back in a low bun. I was reaching for a bottle of sparkling water when I heard someone say my name. Not Ella. Not hey. My full name. I turned, expecting to see someone from work, a stylist or maybe a photographer. Instead my breath caught. Ethan. For a split second neither of us spoke. His dark hazel eyes scanned me, and I could see the exact moment he realized who I had become. Lost. Like he was struggling to reconcile the girl he had dismissed as plain with the woman standing in front of him now. Ella, he said finally, his voice uncertain. Wow. You look. I waited, curious to hear what he would say. Different, he finished, his brows furrowing slightly. I smiled, tilting my head. Do I? He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yeah. I mean, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I saw your photos online. I wasn't sure if it was really you. It's me, I said simply. He hesitated as if debating his next words. We should catch up sometime. Maybe grab coffee. For a moment I almost laughed. How easy it was for men like him. How effortlessly they could ask for things they didn't deserve. A few months ago I would have jumped at the chance. I would have convinced myself that this was fate, that maybe he had changed, that maybe I was finally good enough. But now I saw it for what it was. He hadn't changed. I had. I gave him a polite smile. I don't think so, Ethan. He blinked, clearly not expecting rejection. Come on, Ella, don't be like that. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? He faltered. I didn't realize back then, okay? I was stupid. I tilted my head, considering his words. Then I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough to let him feel the weight of what I was about to say. Yeah, you were, I whispered, smiling sweetly. And I don't wait around for stupid men to figure things out. Then I turned, grabbed my water and walked away without looking back. Ethan had already wasted enough of my time. The next few weeks moved at an almost dizzying pace. My first runway show was around the corner, a high-profile event featuring some of the biggest names in the industry. I had spent so long proving myself in photos, but this was different. This was about presence, about movement, about knowing that all eyes were on me and owning it. The night of the show, as I stood backstage, I felt the familiar stirrings of nerves creeping in. The energy of the venue was electric. Models adjusting their outfits, designers making last-minute changes, photographers already capturing the backstage chaos. Sienna appeared beside me, her own outfit sleek and effortless. She nudged me lightly. Nervous. I let out a slow breath. A little. She smirked. Good. That means you care. I turned to her, meeting her steady gaze. What if I mess up? You won't, she said simply. You've already done the hardest part, Ella. You've stepped into the light. Now all that's left is to walk through it. A stagehand signaled us, calling us into position. The music swelled, the lights shifted, and suddenly it was my turn. As I stepped onto the runway, I felt the world slow. Cameras flashed. Eyes followed my every move. And I realized as I moved with confidence down the catwalk, that I wasn't just walking for them. I was walking for me. For the girl who had once felt invisible. For the woman who had learned how to shine. The runway show was a blur of flashing lights, camera clicks, and whispered admiration. The moment my heels hit the glossy surface of the catwalk, the world shifted. I wasn't just Ella Harper anymore. I was someone to watch. When the show ended, I barely had time to process it before people started approaching me. Photographers, designers, talent scouts. Sienna was right beside me, a glass of champagne in her hand, watching with an amused expression as I tried to keep up. "You're officially on the map now," she murmured in my ear. "Get used to it." I wasn't sure I ever would. But I wanted to. Because for the first time I was part of a world that had once felt impossible to reach. The next morning my name was everywhere. Fashion blogs, online magazines, even trending on social media. My photo from the show, the one where I walked with undeniable confidence, my blonde hair cascading in waves, my green eyes piercing through the lens, was circulating like wildfire. The new face to watch. Ella Harper, the model no one saw coming. From nobody to next big thing. I read the headlines, my fingers tightening around my phone. Nobody. That's what they had called me. But now I was something. I should have felt invincible. But success, I was learning, came with its own price. The more my name spread, the higher the expectations became. My agent booked back-to-back shoots, castings, interviews. Every morning started with early call times, hours of fittings, walking through endless studios with people analyzing me like I was a product to be perfected. Lose just a little more weight. Designers love a smaller frame. Try a different pose, your jawline needs to be sharper. Don't overthink it, just give us the look. At first I told myself it was normal. Part of the industry. But some nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling just as small as I had before. Was I actually good enough? Or had I just changed enough to be tolerable? One afternoon I was at a cafe between shoots when my phone vibrated with a text. "Unknown number. Fame looks good on you." I frowned, typing back. "Me, who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then the response. "Unknown number. It's Ethan." I stared at the screen. Of course it was. I should have ignored him. I should have deleted the message and moved on. But part of me, that old part of me, wanted to know what he would say. So I typed back. "Me, what do you want?" "Ethan, I don't know. I've been thinking about you." I guess I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. "Me, you didn't lose anything, Ethan. You threw it away." No response. I locked my phone, exhaling. His words didn't matter anymore. But the fact that he thought they still could? That was the final proof of how much I had changed. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back shoots, I sat in the dressing room, my reflection staring back at me. The same blonde waves. The same green eyes. But there was something different. I looked tired. The endless pressure, the constant scrutiny, it was starting to weigh on me. Just as I was debating whether I had the energy to go to another industry event, a voice broke through my thoughts. "Do you ever take a break?" I turned. Leaning casually against the doorframe was Liam Hayes. His dark hair was slightly messy, his blue eyes sharp yet amused, like he had been watching me from afar and finally decided to step in. I arched an eyebrow. "You're one to talk. You practically live on magazine covers." He smirked. "Yeah, but at least I eat pizza in between shoots." A laugh escaped me, unexpected but real. He stepped closer. "You looked great out there today." I rolled my eyes. "You say that to every new model." His smirk softened into something more sincere. "No, I don't." I felt my heart skip just a little. It was the first real conversation I had in weeks that didn't feel like a transaction. And for the first time since stepping into this world, I wondered if I had been so focused on proving myself that I had forgotten to enjoy it. A few days later, I walked into my next shoot with a new kind of confidence. Not the kind built from proving people wrong. The kind built from knowing who I was. When the photographer called my name, I didn't hesitate. I stepped in front of the camera, met the lens head-on, and smiled. Because I wasn't just a rising star. I was a woman who had learned her worth. And for the first time, I didn't care who was watching. I was shining for me. The text from Ethan stopped after that last message, but I knew it wasn't over. Men like him, the ones who never appreciated what they had until it was gone, always found a way to make their presence known. I wasn't waiting for him, and I wasn't thinking about him. Not when my career was finally reaching heights I had never imagined. Yet when I arrived at an exclusive afterparty for one of the biggest fashion campaigns of the year, I felt the weight of his stare before I even saw him. The venue was breathtaking, a rooftop lounge overlooking the city skyline, filled with celebrities, designers, and the people who shaped the industry. I was there as one of the faces of the campaign, something that still felt surreal, yet as natural as breathing. Cameras flashed, people greeted me with recognition, and I moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had learned that confidence wasn't about pretending, it was about believing. And then I saw him. Ethan stood near the bar, drink in hand, watching me like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The last time we were in the same room, I had been the girl he called plain, the one he took for granted. Now I was the woman everyone was looking at. He pushed off the bar, walking toward me with that same cocky, self-assured smirk I used to fall for, and yet as he stood in front of me I felt nothing. Not pain, not longing, just a quiet realization that he was a part of a past I no longer belonged to. Ella, he said, like he was tasting the name, like he had to make sure it was real. I arched a brow, sipping my champagne, waiting for him to say whatever it was he had come to say. You've changed, he finally admitted, eyes trailing over my face like he was searching for something familiar. Or maybe, I said, tilting my head slightly, you just never really saw me to begin with. His smirk faltered. I was a jerk, I know. I said things I shouldn't have, things I didn't mean. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, playing the part of the regretful ex perfectly. I guess I just never thought I'd lose you. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, letting him believe for just a second that maybe they mattered. Then I smiled, setting my glass down on a nearby table. Ethan, I said softly, stepping close enough that he leaned in just slightly, waiting, hoping. You didn't lose me. You never had me. And with that I turned, walking away without looking back. As I moved through the crowd I felt something shift, something settle into place. That was the last tie to my old life, to the girl who had once been afraid of being forgotten. Ethan's regret didn't make me feel powerful. It didn't validate me. It simply reminded me that I had done the one thing he never expected. I had outgrown him. Just as I was about to leave the party, I felt a familiar presence beside me. Liam, ever the enigma, leaned casually against the doorway, watching me with those sharp blue eyes that always seemed to see straight through me. So that was the famous ex, he mused, nodding toward Ethan, who was now drowning himself in whatever expensive whiskey he had ordered. Yep, I said, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That was him. Liam studied me for a moment before nodding. Did it feel as good as you thought it would? I considered the question, letting the moment sink in. It felt better. A slow, knowing smirk tugged at his lips. Good. Because he's definitely watching you leave. I laughed, shaking my head. Not my problem. Liam chuckled, offering me his arm. Come on, rising star. Let's get out of here. As I took his arm, stepping into the night, I knew without a doubt that the past was exactly where it belonged, behind me. The night air was crisp as we stepped out of the venue, city lights stretching in every direction. My heels clicked against the pavement, my mind still processing the encounter with Ethan, but only in the way you recall a minor inconvenience. Fleeting, irrelevant. Liam walked beside me, his usual confident smirk in place, but his eyes held something else tonight. Amusement, maybe curiosity, as if he had been watching me long enough to know this moment meant something. You didn't even flinch back there, he mused, holding the car door open for me. I thought people liked a little revenge when facing their exes. I slid into the passenger seat, glancing at him with a small smirk of my own. It wasn't revenge. Revenge would mean I still cared what he thought. Liam let out a low chuckle as he started the car. Cold. I like it. As we pulled away, I let my head rest against the seat, watching the city blur past. It wasn't until the car slowed in front of my building that Liam spoke again. So, tell me, now that you're officially past all that, what's next? His voice was light, teasing, but something in the question made my stomach tighten. What was next? I had spent so much time proving myself, transforming, climbing higher, faster. But now, for the first time, I wasn't looking at the next goal. I was simply here, in this moment. I turned to him, studying the way the streetlights cast soft shadows across his face. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe for once I stop running towards something and just enjoy where I am. He nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. Sounds like a good plan. There was something unreadable in his expression, something I couldn't quite name. But before I could think too much about it, he smirked again. You should probably start by getting some sleep. You have that interview tomorrow. I groaned, already regretting the early morning ahead. Thanks for the reminder. He laughed, shaking his head as I stepped out of the car. Good night, rising star. The nickname should have been cheesy, but the way he said it made warmth spread through my chest. I didn't turn back as I walked into my building, but I knew he was still watching. And maybe for the first time I wanted to be seen, not just by the world but by him. The next morning I woke up to a flood of notifications. My latest campaign had just been released and within minutes my name was trending again. My agent called before I even had a chance to scroll through everything. How do you feel about expanding into acting? She asked, her voice full of excitement. I hesitated, caught off guard. Acting? There's an audition coming up for a major film, she explained. They're looking for fresh talent. You've got the look, the presence, and right now everyone's talking about you. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my thoughts racing. This was huge. Bigger than anything I had considered. I had only just found my place in the modeling world, and now there was an opportunity to step into something even larger. A year ago I would have said no without hesitation, doubted myself before even trying. But now, I thought about the girl I had been, the one who let herself fade, who let people like Ethan dictate her worth. And then I thought about who I was now, the woman who had stepped onto runways, into flashing lights, who had faced the past and walked away without a second glance. Maybe it was time to see just how far I could go. Send me the details, I finally said. My agent made a pleased noise, rattling off times and locations, but my mind was already somewhere else. Because for the first time I wasn't just chasing a dream. I was building a future. The audition was in 3 days. 3 days to decide whether I was really going to step into another unknown, whether I was ready to go from being seen to being remembered. The thought was terrifying, but the idea of not trying? That was worse. I buried myself in preparation, reading over the script my agent sent, watching interviews of seasoned actors, studying their poise, their ability to control a room with nothing but presence. It wasn't just about looking the part anymore. It was about owning it. Liam found me one evening, tucked into the corner of a quiet lounge, highlighting lines in the script with a focus that must have been ridiculous to watch. He plucked the pages from my hands before I could protest, scanning them with mild interest. Didn't take you for the acting type, he mused, flipping through the script. Thought you liked making a statement without words. I snatched the papers back, arching a brow. And here I thought you were too busy being mysterious to have an opinion on my career. He smirked, leaning back against the couch. I always have opinions. I just don't give them freely. His gaze flickered over me, something unreadable there. But if you really want to do this, don't half-ass it. He was right. I couldn't walk into this audition as someone testing the waters. I had to walk in as someone who belonged. The morning of the audition I stood outside the building, inhaling slow, steady breaths. I had walked 100 runways, posed for dozens of magazine covers, and yet standing here on the verge of something entirely new, I felt the weight of it pressing into my skin. The casting director barely looked up as I stepped into the room, murmuring something to his assistant. I squared my shoulders, pushing down the nerves, and when he finally lifted his gaze, I gave him the same look I gave every camera, every runway. One that said, I am worth watching. He gestured toward the script in my hands, uninterested. Whenever you're ready. I exhaled slowly and began. The thing about transformation is that people assume it happens overnight. That one day you wake up different, that confidence arrives in neat little packages, wrapped in new clothes, new opportunities. But confidence is built in the moments where no one is watching. It's built in the rejection, the doubts, the nights you spend questioning yourself but push forward anyway. It's in the way you learn to fill the silence without needing permission. I spoke my lines not as words on a page but as something lived, something real. And when I finished, the casting director didn't immediately respond. He tapped his pen against the table, studying me in a way that made my stomach tighten. Then he set the script down. That was unexpected. I blinked. Unexpected good or unexpected bad? A slow smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. We'll be in touch. I stepped out of the building into the bright afternoon light, my heart still hammering. It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no either. It was possibility. And that was enough. I didn't tell anyone about the audition, not even Sienna, not even my agent. I wanted this moment to be mine alone, at least for a little while. But later that night, as I sat in the back of a sleek car heading to another event, my phone buzzed. A single message. Call me. I frowned, glancing at the number. It wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it immediately. Ethan. I exhaled sharply, debating whether I should even acknowledge it. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and some part of me wanted to know what could possibly be so important. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cool night air wrapping around me, and against my better judgment I dialed. The call barely rang twice before he answered. Ella. Just my name, like it meant something. Like it still belonged to him. I waited, not giving him the satisfaction of an immediate response. What do you want, Ethan? He hesitated, and for the first time I heard something different in his voice. Not the usual arrogance. Something else. I saw something today. Something that doesn't make sense. My brows furrowed, a flicker of irritation surfacing. Spit it out. He exhaled sharply. I saw a photo of you. And in the background, Liam was there. Looking at you like. He stopped as if the thought physically pained him. Like what? I pressed, more amused than anything. Like you were his. The laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and unexpected. Ethan, you don't get to care about that. You don't get to act like any of this concerns you. He was quiet for a long moment before he finally spoke again. I just thought maybe we could talk. I shook my head, already tired of the conversation. We already did, Ethan. Back when you made it clear I wasn't enough for you. Another pause. I was wrong. The words hung between us, heavy, meaningless. Maybe a few months ago they would have mattered. But now, they were nothing more than echoes of a past that no longer belonged to me. Yeah, I murmured. You were. And then I hung up. I didn't feel victorious, didn't feel the need to gloat. All I felt was relief. Because I had finally closed a door I should have never left open in the first place. When I walked into the event, the room buzzing with energy, I didn't search for familiar faces. I didn't wonder what people thought of me, didn't question whether I belonged. I had spent enough of my life seeking validation from people who never deserved it. And tonight, as I stood beneath the glow of a world that had once seemed out of reach, I realized something. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I had already won. The days following Ethan's call passed in a blur of photo shoots, meetings, and last-minute event preparations. I didn't give him another thought, not when I had bigger things to focus on. But life had a way of forcing unresolved things back into view, whether you were ready or not. I was in the middle of a fitting when my agent's assistant knocked on the door, her expression unreadable. You need to see this, she said, holding out her phone. My stomach tightened as I took it, scanning the screen. It was a tabloid article, the kind designed to stir up whispers, to make people stop scrolling. But it wasn't the headline that made my breath catch. It was the photo. Ethan standing outside a cafe looking straight into the camera. And beside him, the one person I had never expected to see in the same frame. The article was speculative, of course. No solid facts, just hints and rumors, but the implication was clear. Who is Liam Hayes really interested in? The rising star model, or the girl she used to be? My grip on the phone tightened. It wasn't just a meaningless piece of gossip. It was a question, a doubt planted where none had existed before. My mind raced, trying to piece together why Ethan and Liam would even be in the same space, let alone speaking. And more than that, what had they talked about? I forced myself to stay calm, to remind myself that I had no reason to be affected by any of it. But hours later, when I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through the article again despite knowing better, my phone rang. I hesitated for a brief second before answering. I assume you've seen the headline, he said without preamble, his voice edged with something I couldn't quite place. I leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. Hard to miss when my face is attached to it. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Figured you'd have more questions. I frowned, not sure if I was annoyed or intrigued by how unbothered he sounded. Maybe. Should I? Another pause, then, depends on how much you still care about him. That made me sit up. You think this is about Ethan? I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. You tell me. I rolled my eyes, frustration creeping in. Liam, why were you even talking to him? He exhaled, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. He wanted to know if there was still room for him in your life. I stilled, waiting for the anger to come. The irritation. But instead all I felt was exhaustion. And what did you tell him? Liam didn't answer right away. Then finally, I told him he was already too late. Something in my chest tightened, and I hated that it did. Why do you even care? Another long pause. Then, because I see you, Ella. And I don't think you've let yourself believe that yet. His words settled in my stomach, heavy and undeniable. Because as much as I wanted to believe I had moved past Ethan completely, as much as I wanted to think I was untouchable now, part of me had still been waiting for that final moment of closure. But now, looking back, I realized I had already gotten it. I just hadn't noticed. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. Well, you're right. He is too late. Liam hummed in approval. Good. Then let's focus on what's next. I smiled despite myself. And what's that? His voice was lighter now, teasing. Wouldn't you like to know? I laughed, shaking my head. Maybe for the first time in a long time I wasn't just trying to move forward. I actually was. The invitation arrived the next morning, delivered in an elegant black envelope with embossed silver lettering. My name stood out in bold script, a symbol of just how much had changed. It was an exclusive industry gala, one of the biggest of the year, attended by the most influential figures in fashion, film, and business. A year ago I wouldn't have even been on the guest list. Now I wasn't just attending, I was one of the highlights. My agent called immediately, her excitement barely contained as she rattled off the details. The designers who wanted to dress me, the photographers who would be lining up for a shot. But there was only one thing on my mind as I set the invitation down on my coffee table. This wasn't just another event. This was a moment, one where every person who had ever doubted me, dismissed me, or forgotten me would have no choice but to see me. And I was ready for it. The night of the gala, my reflection in the mirror barely felt real. The gown was a masterpiece, custom designed for me, midnight blue satin that hugged my frame, a delicate slit revealing just enough to hint at confidence without trying too hard. My blonde waves cascaded over my shoulders, every detail polished to perfection. I didn't just look the part. I was the part. The flash of cameras hit me the second I stepped onto the carpet, voices calling my name, the sea of journalists and reporters pressing forward, eager for a quote, a moment, a photo that would be the headline by morning. I moved through them with ease, pausing just enough to let them get what they needed but never giving too much. Because now I understood something they didn't. I controlled the narrative. I was the story. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with power. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne, the low hum of important conversations floating through the space. Familiar faces turned as I entered, some with curiosity, others with recognition. And then, as if the universe had orchestrated the moment for dramatic effect, I saw him. Ethan. He stood near the bar, dressed in a tailored suit, looking exactly as he always had. Except this time he wasn't the one everyone was watching. I was. His gaze locked onto me instantly, his eyes widening just slightly, as if some part of him had truly believed he would never see me again. I felt the corners of my lips twitch, not in a smile but in something more subtle. An acknowledgement that the tables had turned and we both knew it. Liam appeared beside me, his presence effortless, his expression unreadable as he followed my gaze. Well, that's predictable, he murmured, sipping his drink. I tilted my head slightly. What is? He smirked, eyes flickering toward Ethan. Him standing there looking like a man who just realized he lost something he can't get back. I let out a soft breath, the smallest laugh, because Liam was right. Ethan wasn't just looking at me. He was staring, caught in some endless loop of realization, like he was only now understanding what had been in front of him all along. And yet, for all his regret, for all the unspoken words lingering in the air between us, I felt nothing. No longing, no bitterness. Just clarity. I turned to Liam, my green eyes meeting his blue, and for the first time, I saw what had been there all along. Someone who had never asked me to change. Someone who had seen me long before the world had caught up. I smiled, shaking my head. It's funny, I mused. I thought this moment would feel different. Liam arched a brow. And how does it feel? I exhaled, glancing back at Ethan one last time before letting my gaze drift forward, toward the future waiting ahead. Like it doesn't matter at all. And with that, I walked past Ethan without a second glance, straight into the life I had built for myself. The cool night air wrapped around us as we stepped out onto the quiet street, the echoes of the gala fading behind us. The world outside was different. Slower, quieter, more real. I exhaled, feeling something settle in my chest, something that had been unraveling for months. I wasn't the same girl who had once stood on the outside looking in, wishing to be noticed. I had walked through the fire, rebuilt myself from the ground up, and now I was standing here not because I had fought to prove my worth, but because I had always been enough. Liam's hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and steady. He glanced at me, that ever-present smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "You good?" His voice was easy, casual, like we hadn't just walked away from a room full of people who once would have dismissed me. I met his gaze, the weight of the night, the years, the transformation settling into something lighter. "Yeah," I murmured, a slow smile spreading across my lips. "I finally am." He squeezed my hand once, not saying anything else, just letting the moment exist as it was. And as we walked down the empty sidewalk, the city stretching before us, I knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing something. I wasn't running toward a future I thought I needed to prove I mattered. I was already exactly where I was meant to be.